Good evening. I'm Cynthia Hoven, and I'd love to welcome you to the final and the third lecture in this wonderful series of Michaelmas, the meaning of Michaelmas, and who is Michael. Now, as we've done in the past, I would love to begin this evening with a small eurythmy exercise. Would you join me if you would like to? And take a nice stretch. As you've heard from me before, through eurythmy, anthropathy becomes wise throughout our entire bodies, head to foot. So I'd like to begin today with the exercise that many of you know already, called weight bears downwards and light streams upwards. We human beings are connected to heaven and earth. And later on, at the end of this class, we will go more deeply into that picture, that imagination. We'll begin right now by standing between weight and light. One foot out to the right and one out to the left. And with this, send your energy from here, this point above your heart, down into your legs and below the bottom of your feet into the earth, as if you are driving pillars into the earth and no one could knock you over. You are strong in your embodiment. Imagine that this is a downwards facing blue triangle with power and strength, and feel weight bears downwards. Now, without losing your ground and without lifting your head, from this point here, let your arms float upwards. This is not with power, but it is with clarity and strength, straight lines. And you feel light stream upwards. And let the feeling be yellow, a yellow triangle. And now, as we've spoken of before, in this region here, the yellow and the blue meet and they become green, a green diamond. And we have learned from Rudolf Steiner that in this area, we have a center in the body where the heart and the solar plexus are, where we are free. And so feel that place become strong in you and feel in the middle between heaviness and lightness. I hold the balance and release and release. Let's do that again. Step to the right, step to the left at the same time. Feel this movement with strength. Let your arms weightlessly be lifted, but don't lift your head. Feel lightness all around you and feel light streams upwards. And it's appropriate for you to feel a kind of oppositional force in the two of them. But then you feel this green diamond in between, and you feel in the middle, I hold the balance. The human being, I know both realms. Release and release. Please notice that my arms and feet are equally wide, not different between the two of them. We'll do it one more time, and this time we'll start with the light, equally justified, different sensation. Light streams upwards, and weight bears downwards, hands and feet equally wide. In the middle, I hold the balance, and release, and release. Now for our next movement, very simple, but I would like us to focus on the eurythmic sound E, the sound of the human ego. And this comes directly from the weight and the light exercise. Put your hands here before the heart chakra. Feel yourself in your center. Now feel that in this place, you have the power to stand and balance between weight and light. As a preliminary exercise, stretch one hand up to the light. Bring the hand back. Doesn't matter if it's right or left, but now spread the opposite hand down into weight. Practice feeling the difference between the two of these. Come back to center. And now practice both of them at the same time, but practice moving them at the same speed. Don't lose the relationship. So many people that I work with can't find that balance. So this is what you are going to seek now. And when Rudolf Steiner taught this, he said, learn to experience this as E. And when we speak the sound E in any word in language, the sound E is like a strung string on a violin. It's a long, thin sound. And this sound we experience in the polarities between up and down. Let's try it again. Feel both arms from your heart. Don't think it. Feel your arms going into polarities. E. Don't speak the E as I just spoke it for you, but feel that you are like that taut string, learning the mystery of being a human being between heaven and earth. And as I said, it can be right or left. There is a somatic feeling difference, but they're both equally justified. I will change my hands this time. I feel them both. One hand powerful in the darkness, one hand powerfully in the light, and my whole chest here peacefully and actively holding the balance. Yourself is speaking into space. Now drop your arms. In conclusion, please experience that even standing like this gives you the feeling of E through your body. Because if you're really stretching yourself, your head is in the light where that hand was, and your legs are in that weighted position. If you stand like this, you have great strength as a human being, holding the dynamic between heaven and earth. This thin line runs right through your spine. So stand in that for a moment. Feel the power be fully present. Dear friends, if you are a teacher, dear friends, if you are a judge or a lawyer, dear friends, if you have a conversation that requires difficulty, stand in your E, your ego power. Thank you. All right, and let's begin our considerations for this evening. This is the third week of the season of Michaelmas, which began on September 29th. And I wonder if you can still feel it. Michaelmas takes 4 weeks as a formal festival. And the day when it happens, we can feel it with the strength, especially people who are working with children. We can feel the festivities at the Waldorf School, for instance, the mood of fighting the dragon. And often there's a lot of upbeat energy then. But Michael is more reticent than that, and he's not pushing into us to keep noticing him. We have to make an inner choice to keep feeling him. We're no longer doing sword fights outwardly. We're no longer doing the dragon pageants, but we are in fact continuing into this season of the harvest. And the winds are blowing harder, certainly here where I live. The nights are getting longer. I love it. And the winds are getting, the weather's getting colder. We in California love that. And with all of that, Michael, the archangel of the autumn, as we've spoken about, is leading us without hesitation into winter. And at the end of the month, this month, We'll face the three festivals of death and dying as we pass beyond the formal festival of Michael, of Michaelmas. We come here in the West, at least, to Halloween, to All Souls Day, and to All Saints Day, the three festivals of death. And these ask us with earnestness, what is it that we face when we face the time of moving out of this sense world? And this is a rightful conclusion to the festival of Michaelmas. What happens when we face the darkness of a world where the senses aren't filling us up? Do we have the understanding to see into the spiritual world? And we would do well at this time to remember Michael's light as we pass into these realms. Not only are we facing the autumn of the year and Michaelmas, Michael as the regent of the autumn, but last week we also looked at how we are living in what is called the cosmic age of Michael, approximately 350-year period under Michael's regency that began in 1879. This entire age lies under his rule. And we can expect his signature to be leading all of the events of this age. What does that mean? This will be an age of first harvesting, that's perhaps done, and then watching what happens as the leaves drop from the seeds of our comfort. In the autumn of these 350 years, the trees will stand bare in a societal, metaphorical sense as we go through these ages. Why? We are living in a time of great change, challenge, metamorphosis. We need to move into that with courage. In fact, we must say that the ancient pictures of Michael riding on the horse and slaying the dragon, the hero, they're no longer appropriate in our age. Michael has put aside all of that, seeing the earnestness of this time. That's where we're going to talk tonight. Michael is more like a wind of change that is blowing through our world, blowing the leaves off the trees, blowing into society, changing so much. And perhaps even better than that, we could say, not just a wind, a storm. And once I lived with this thought a bit, I thought I actually can welcome that, because we know that what we're going through now is not really what we need for the future of humanity. I don't mean here the disasters we're living through now. I mean the kind of comfort and indolence and superficiality that we are in danger of. That is not what we need to become the freely willing human beings that are looking to embody conscious free will and love on the earth. So let's change and let's go. And I'm reminded here of a beautiful poem by D.H. Lawrence that begins with these words. It says, not I, but the wind that blows through me. A fine wind is blowing the new direction of time. Oh, let it bear me, carry me. Oh, let it carry me, and let it be a fine chisel that cleaves into our time. That's all I can give you of that poem right now, but this is the wind of Michael flowing through our culture. How does Michael speak to us today? Not with words. Rudolf Steiner says he doesn't talk. He's not into the kind of arguing and things that we do it nowadays. And certainly he knows that the kind of, for instance, political debate that we have, lots of arguments and so, that's not a way to meet each other. He speaks through his presence. His lips are closed, but he is there as a radiant being, the countenance of Christ, if we can find him, if we look. And as we know, because he's the archangel of the autumn, he doesn't speak to us with the energy of springtime, nor the energy of summer, this giving and giving and giving of outer light. No, he speaks with the energy of autumn, with that which can be, not that which can be given to us from without. His gaze is earnest. He's entrusting us, as I said last week, with cosmic intelligence. Michael, the spirit of our time, does not want a humanity that merely receives from him. He looks away from people who just want to receive spiritual blessings like that. He seeks people who have willpower, who know what they need to strive for, and they can do it. They can engage their own will. Yes, we stand in the great world autumn. And as we look at climate change and all the things we're going through, in a way, this tearing apart energy is seen also in nature, earlier and earlier each year, as things are even externally dying away in our climate catastrophes. Altogether, this age is demanding of us our own inner activity and our independent will. So I hope all these dynamic words are making you feel inwardly upright. We, the sons and daughters of the Michael age, we will have to discover ever more courageous ways of living. Yeah, Michael, he's not going to give us gifts. He gave us the cosmic intelligence. He entrusted us with cosmic intelligence, and now he wants to live in our heart, even in our conscience, our sensing of our higher meaning. He also won't take away our difficulties. He supports us right through our difficulties because he wants us to grow strong. And we will. We definitely will. But you know, I think I've always heard stories, you've probably heard stories, in times of crisis and suffering, we are all much more alive and alert. This indolence doesn't help us. We have to be engaged. As if Michael says, if you're having an easy time, I can't help you. And you know, perhaps Rudolf Steiner said, one of the greatest hindrances for spiritual growth is love of comfort. Our riches, our wealth, outer comfort, that's not of any help for us. We have to orient ourselves towards everything, towards the essential nature of our existence. We have to make essential choices. Michael gazes into the future. He knows that the human being is to become strong, a free being who chooses will. And we're looking towards that, towards seeking what it will mean in all of creation when the human being awakens. So let's continue in remembering what we did last week, and then we'll build on the obstacles that we're facing in this time. Do you remember then You know, if this was a live class, this is a moment when I would turn to the blackboard and say, raise your hand, let me see what you remembered, but I'll remind you here. I spoke of Michael in relationship to the hierarchies. And put this up once again. My trusty music stand, yes. And do you remember? List of all the spiritual hierarchies. Those of you who did the evolution of consciousness class with me last spring, we already went deeply into this, how everything that we live in is beingness, is consciousness. And I like to think of us like Matryoshka dolls, those Russian nesting dolls. And we are like tiny, tiny beings with very primitive consciousness inside these spheres of beings, each of them with greater and greater and greater levels of consciousness. And perhaps you remember this line going from the Godhead, the Trinity, through the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones. And just let me write here, we will not spend too much time on this tonight, but we spoke about how the thrones gave rise to ancient Saturn, the Curiosities to ancient Sun, the Dunamis to ancient Moon, and the Exousiae to the Earth. And here. And then these three hierarchies are really quite close to us. Why? Because at the beginning of time in ancient Saturn, they were just beginning on their own journey towards becoming human. These beings had already become more than human by the time our story began. Again, we could talk for an hour about, I'm always tempted to go back and say, wait a minute, do you understand all this? But I won't. If you need to learn more, write me about it. So we have the archai, who are called the time spirits, and the archangels and the angels. And then last week, we gave this picture, we dwelt on how each of these attain their own human stage at one of these cycles, and now we get our human stage on the earth. That means they developed their I am. They awoke from an animal dreamlike stage and became a human being on their own level, not like us, not free will, but their own self-awareness. And now we'll turn right away to Michael, who attained his ego in or on the state of being known as ancient Saturn, which lasted for a period of time that's beyond our Earth time. So in Earth times, perhaps billions of years, but we can't even ask that question. So long, long, long ago. And as this original universe was being suffused with wisdom, and in that wisdom, Michael, well, first all the angels, were struggling to erect them, to do what we're doing now in their own way, and awaken to say, oh, I exist as an independent being. I am. And I told you last week, one could say Michael was the firstborn of those archangels. And think of this pictorial, please, as if the source of wisdom rayed out and out and out and out until it reached to the periphery of universe at that time. And again, think metaphorically. And out here were the archangels that weren't yet alive. And one being named Michael said, I see you. I understand wisdom. I see that this whole universe is wisdom. And because you are, I am. I'd like you to swallow that sentence for a minute. What would that mean to say that to your Creator? Because you are, oh God, because you are, I am. Or you are in me, I am in. Swallow that for a minute. And when Michael saw that, recognized his own self as having been created out of wisdom, he made a solemn vow that he would always serve that wisdom. And then, as I told you last week, Rudolf Steiner, in describing this, had this lovely little turn of phrase. I'm always delighted when I read it. He said, and then Michael noticed in some remote corner of the universe, there was something that existed like a human being. Really endearing, isn't it? And Michael said, I am committed to seeing that this cosmic wisdom will always be able to touch and embrace and live in this earth sphere that's over there. Beautiful, beautiful thought. Michael's desire, thus, is to keep what is developed in this human being always in relationship with the divine spiritual beings, with Sophia. Now, it's very nice to look at all of these, and that's what we usually focus on. And we can understand that their story as this forward story of evolution, out of which human beings can develop as free beings. We talked about that last week. This challenge and promise of being free is only possible if we live in a condition where God, Creator, can't force us to say, because you are, I am. In our current condition, we're perfectly capable of saying, I am. God, there is no God, I am. We're perfectly capable of saying that. And out of this, hopefully, we will awaken to say, but this is only possible because I experience God. I experience the creative beings. From one perspective, it is not wrong to say we are just insignificant beings on an insignificant place in the universe. And also, and nevertheless, it's also absolutely true to say, no, we are the seed of an entire future. And to the extent that all of us, few of us, some of us, awaken to feel that deepest sense of spiritual self, we are the seed for a whole new chapter in evolution. And of course, we are hoping that all of us as brothers and sisters will make that. Even as the Mahayana Buddha said, I'm sticking with this until we are all together. Even as Christ came and gave everything he had for that, it's our journey to hope that we'll all awaken into that stage. But when we look at the current state of our earth, we see that this isn't going to be an easy path towards the future, right? What are we looking at? Of course, there is COVID. I'm just going to nail, and you've got your own list. There is the COVID virus. And not only the COVID virus, there is the intense cultural or interpersonal fighting right now, which is going on as if in this fighting, we're already engaged in the so-called war of all against war, all against all. It's so hard for us to understand each other. And for me, this is even more grievous than COVID itself, the virus of our souls. We're also looking at social injustice on a massive scale. And the good thing is we're becoming aware of it more and more. We look back on the 20th century, genocide on a massive scale, the atom bomb, the ever-present danger that we could destroy the earth so that we can't come back and live on it for another few million years. We'll be back, but we could destroy it for a while. The climate change is another way that we're destroying things. It's grievous. We're seeing the disappearance of species. And then there's also, of course, the computers and the rise of artificial intelligence, which has the intention of replacing human beings or making an artificial human being or consciousness in a machine. All of these things with these trespasses on human freedom. Can we call this evil? Can we call this the opposite of goodness? How in the world does any of this serve the good? And so now we're going to diverge a little from this picture of great light and say, to the extent that we seek to understand that we live in a world of beings, we can also say that not all beings are on the same, let me say it an easy way, not on the same evolutionary timeline towards where we might want to get to. Some beings are going faster, some beings are laggards. That's one way to talk about what we commonly call evil. If we all went on this beautifully designed path towards one freedom, we wouldn't be in very much trouble. But we don't simply live in that kind of a world. And here we say, we don't just, so do we have a battle between good and evil? Until we have met the work of Rudolf Steiner, most of us think like that. And even after we've met Rudolf Steiner, sometimes we might forget that he's shown us, no, we have to look at this a different way. Just as we have a triad of God, we have triads of triads. All this threefoldness means something. Going to erase all this, but I want you to remember this one, where the archangels are lined up with the curiosities. We'll be back to that. So it would be easy to just say, to choose my colors, we have good and we have evil. But I think it's clear to see that we actually stand in a position of relativity. If we're doing only good deeds, no, let me start at it this way. We can think of this as light and we can think of darkness. That's a relativation of speed. But there's always something in between. And this something in between is holding the balance between excesses. So there's such a thing as too much light and too much darkness. And it's these polarities that set up the dynamic of our growth and our dilemma. So let's work on that tonight. We have a threefold relationship, the up, the down, and the middle. And we could draw this also right, left, front, back, but we'll start calling it this. And if we give names to these dynamics, as spiritual beings, and be patient if you haven't heard this before, we will spend many minutes on this, that the too much light bears the name Lucifer, which means the light bearer. And many of us know that names, but maybe not people in India, for instance, I don't know. And The being of too much darkness is called Ahriman. And we can give them lots of different attributes. What does a being of lightness carry? Light, right, as a soul quality would be excitement, enthusiasm, in a good sense, artistry, insight, understanding. A lot more to say. Build that up. What comes from the light? And good light is a good thing. Too much light is really a difficulty, especially if a person commits themselves to that. A person who commits themselves to too much light could lose their connection, their love, their compassion for others. It can lead to great egotism. Let me do that. I'm only caring about my own comfort, spiritual ecstasy, my experiences. It would lead a person possibly to take a lot of hallucinogenics, go to another world. It can also be one of the flavors of meditation. If we just want meditation that helps us to dissolve into cosmic oneness. These feelings of ungroundedness and ecstasy. And we can also see that then in bodily diseases. As a therapist, I see that people who get a lot of inflammations are just rising energy. And then the opposite pole. And this one would be the spirit of too much darkening or hardening. Dark, hard, material. And this one denies the spirit. But in a good sense, what does it do? It gives form, structure. This is a good thing. So let's tell a few stories about them. When we talk about the story of Adam and Eve, and I hope most of you are familiar with it. Adam and Eve, in a paradisical situation, did not want to leave the garden. And they were told metaphorical language, but the metaphor carries great wisdom in it. A snake came to them and said, "Why don't you eat of this apple? Why did God tell you not to eat this apple? If you eat this apple, you will have the wisdom of the gods." They didn't have that so-called wisdom yet because they were living in so-called ignorance, in perfect harmony. Everything worked for them. They never had to figure things out. They looked at a plant and they knew what to eat or what not to eat. They understood where to sleep, etc., etc. Their bodies were so soft and agile, and probably they could make trees grow just by telling them that they needed the trees to grow so they could sleep like that. But it is said a snake identified with Lucifer said, "Eat this apple, and then you will actually know what you're doing. You won't just experience it as a dream." They chose to eat it, and we have to live with this paradox and say they had to do it or they would never have fallen to see things clearly. They fell and they began to see the sense world and desire it and crave it and have to figure things out. Figuring things out gives us a feeling of solidity. And so we awoke from innocence. In the Bible, it says that they saw that they were naked. And then in the Bible, once again, it says an archangel named Gabriel came. Again, think metaphorically. If this is, if you're resisting this in any way, just think of it as powerful metaphors. An archangel came to them and said, "You must go. You must leave paradise. You must leave this condition of innocence and go forth into the world. No longer were their bodies so soft and fluid. No longer did nature, animals and plants respond to them so easily. And over the course of thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we arrived at where we are now. Definitely not easier. And in order that this experience in the world of the senses would become more of a challenge that we could meet, it needed to become harder. It's difficult to say, was Ahriman commanded to make it harder, or did we make it harder because we needed it? But the earth gradually became harder, and even geologists say now, the earth is becoming harder. The earth is dying. The vitality is less. My husband, as a biodynamic farmer, also could say that. The vitality of plants and seeds is less than it used to be. So as long as we lived, first, let's say these beings live in nature. There is this uprising energy, which we see in certain seasons of the year, and there is a season towards winter, which is the time that we're entering now. One of the pictures that we have when we talk about Michael fighting the dragon, that Ahriman is saying, come into this realm of winter and hard and cold and darkness. And we have to meet those forces of darkness in nature and in ourselves. So these are beings outside of ourselves and in ourselves. Ahriman is also the father of lies, we have to say. His lie for us is that there is no spiritual world. Now consider this. Ahriman is our challenge now at this time in evolution. Ahriman could not be a challenge, could not truly harm human beings when we lived in the age of mythology, when we were still living in the world of alchemy, even in the age of the Greek philosophers. We still felt close enough to divine wisdom and felt the thoughts were implanted in us that Ahriman couldn't really grab hold of us. But when we reach this nadir of materiality, Ahriman was right there to start messing with us. And he could start telling us, are you still thinking about God? Why? Why do you think about God? Look at, I'll give you comfort. One of the reasons we say, he's not only evil, he's a seductor. He says, I'll take care of your comfort. And he also says, I will tell you, the only reason that you think is because your neurons fire. The only reason that you feel is because you have these endocrine secretions in you. You're completely material. It's really silly to think that there's any spiritual beings ever. It's a fable. And all of us who've been through public education, I include myself, have really been given that to drink as a worldview. All of us who have lived with commercials and the seduction of artificial impressions, intelligence, mass media, we've all been fed a picture that says, your quest for spirit is a lie, you silly people. Come with me. And in some, Goethe, in his great drama Faust, said, it is said that Ahriman actually needs to only get one human soul to completely believe in him and follow him after death, and he'll be victorious. He wants to take all of Sophia's cosmic wisdom for himself. So let me now read something from these Michael letters. And Michael says, or Rudolf Steiner says, one imagination of Michael is the following. He reigns through the course of time, clad in cosmic light as his essential being, shaping cosmic warmth as the revelation of his nature. As a being, he conducts himself like a world, asserts himself only insofar as he asserts the world. He guides forces towards the earth from every corner of the universe. These are Sophia's forces. Ahriman is the opposite imagination. He, listen carefully, he would like to wrest time away from space. He sends rays of his own light. And he doesn't say, because you are, I am. He says, I am a light source. I am an ego. He sends rays of his own light into the darkness that surrounds him. The more he brings his own aims to fulfillment, the frostier grows his environment. Please shudder a little bit when you hear that. He moves like a world completely compressed into a single being, that of himself alone, asserting himself while denying the world. His movement suggests uncanny forces issuing from dark earth caverns that cling to him. When an individual seeks freedom, I'm still reading, with no tendency to egotism, when freedom becomes for him pure love of the action he is carrying out, then he finds it possible to approach Michael. As I read this, I had to even think of the great social debates that we're having in our time right now. People who claim, I don't need my freedom. Are they doing that without egotism? Is it pure love? If a person attempts free actions while tainted with egoistic striving, if his freedom means a proud exhibiting of himself in his deeds, he is in danger of straying into Ahriman's realm. What is it? The individual's love of the deed, which is Michaelic, or self-love that motivates our actions, which is Ahriman. When a person feels himself as a free being close to Michael, then he is moving towards permeating his whole humanness with the power of intellectuality. This is Rudolf Steiner's word of speaking of humanized wisdom. Although he thinks with his head, his heart feels the lightness or the darkness of his thought. And such a human sends his will into humanity as he senses that his thoughts are moving in him as intentions, spiritually inspired. He finds himself not through seeking himself, but through a love-imbued will relationship to the world. When a person becomes a victim of Ahrimanic seduction, as he develops freedom, he is enticed into a kind of intellectuality like a spirit automaton, in which he is no longer himself, but just part of a mechanism. All his thinking then is just mere head experience. Such a person is cut off from the experience of his own heart and will life, and he then loses his own sense of individuality. He loses that inner imprint of his humanness that makes him an individual. He loses himself in self-seeking. He withdraws from the world to which he refuses to give his love. But really, it is only through his loving that in the world, that we can develop the experience of selfhood. Let me continue a little bit. The above considerations make it understandable that Michael is the guide to Christ. Michael goes his loving way through the world with the full gravity and earnestness of his nature, of his bearing and his actions. Those who work with Michael act lovingly in relation to the world about them. For love must flow out into the surrounding world. Otherwise, it becomes self-love. And if this love is present in one's Michael orientation, love for others can radiate back into one's own self. And that makes it possible to love without self-love. This enables our souls to a meeting with the Christ. I'm going to do a little screen share for you now. Some of you are familiar with this that I'm going to show you here. This is a statue that was carved by Rudolf Steiner. This is, I'm not sure, perhaps 20 or 25 feet tall. And he carved it to stand in the auditorium, the great hall of the Goetheanum. It was meant to stand at the back of the stage, and in front of that, dramas and eurythmy and all sorts of things were to take place. And this magnificent statue, he was working on this statue for many years. And one night, the first Goetheanum building, which was all wooden, was burnt down by arsony. Wait a minute. That's not the right word, is it? Okay. Yeah, arson. And this statue was carved out and laid on the lawn. And it said, Steiner walked past and saw this lying down, and he said, that must never happen. The statue must always stand upright. So now the statue stands in the Goetheanum up on the top floor. And if you go to visit the Goetheanum, you can visit this. I imagine that some half of the people who are watching this lesson know this picture. What do we have here? We have this being in the center, and we call this being the representative of the human being. Sometimes we also say that is actually Christ. But around Christ, we must imagine also Michael standing here in this picture. And you'll notice he's doing this gesture of E that we worked on before. One hand lifted towards the heights and one towards the depth. And what else do you see here? There are 5 other creatures here. Let's start down here. This creature is a being who's lying on the ground, underground, if you will. Here's an arm. He's lying in the trees. Here's a kind of broken wing, which looks like a tree root. Right here is his jaw. He's looking up at this human being. And there's another hand back there, and his legs are all enmeshed in the roots underground. And in this, we can see a kind of archetypal picture of Ahriman underground, holding nature fast, creating form. And as long as Ahriman stays in the realm of matter, he's in a place that's serving what we need to go through. Yet here is another Ahrimanic being. And this being is also grabbing and holding tight. He's skeletal. I know we can't see him very well, but he is Ahriman who has entered into the realm in which the human being stands. And if you will, he's trying to grab the human being's soul. And this is a picture of how these forces of mechanics are getting really too close to us. They're trying to get into the human soul. And up here, we have, and here, I should show you here too, we have another being, and this is Lucifer. Let me see if I can find his head. This is Lucifer's arm. This is his wing. It's hard for me to find his head right now. Here it is. He's falling down out of the skies. And Lucifer is called the fallen angel. He carries wisdom. He is an angel of great light. But if there's too much Lucifer in us, then we don't live in the light. Then we are, as I said before, condemned to this ecstatic experience, and we don't serve the earth. And this Lucifer over here, entangled with Ahriman, is trying to get hold of the human soul. Now you might have noticed this character up here called Cosmic Humor, and it's kind of it's a figure that makes us stop and question. But Rudolf Steiner said this figure needs to be here too. It's as if ever patient God sees with maybe better than humor, we could say bemused. He understands all of it. I think perhaps you've also heard of Indian gurus. And when pilgrims visit them, the gurus look at them and smile because they know that after all, everything is working out. One more thing I want to show you, I don't know if I can get this closer. I don't see a zoom in, zoom out here. Let me look. No, I don't see that. If we could see this chest, we could see that there's an enormous amount of movement here, as if you can see the heart chakra moving. And so as we were doing in eurythmy, with one hand, we're reaching into the light. The other hand, we're holding Ahriman in his place. We do that with the heart beautifully enlivened. And this human being is walking, doesn't stand still, but moving through time. Earnestness is in his face, but he's showing the archetype of what we shall be and the wisdom we shall embody as we move, as we mature in our cosmic destiny. Oh. All right, let's continue a little bit. And Lucifer. We have to deal with both of these characters in our journey towards evolution. And Rudolf Steiner says, even as Christ, the being that carries our true archetype, that we are stronger than death, that we're stronger than Lucifer and Ahriman, who we are. Lucifer, at one point, had the right to have his own incarnation as a human being. That was a time when the bodies were softer, and that was in 3000 BC. He had his own incarnation. And we learn, it's said that Lucifer has been redeemed. He is not in the same sense a danger to us as Ahriman is. And Ahriman's time is now. So that's another part of this whole study of Ahriman that we're doing. This is his time. This is his age. And Steiner says unequivocally now, at the beginning of this century or soon, or maybe in 100 years, but in this time, maybe already now, Ahriman will incarnate as a human being, violating a human skeleton, the sacred beingness that we are, living inside it, fully penetrating it wrongfully. This shouldn't, yeah. And Rudolf Steiner says, this is appropriate, it's foreordained, it's all right that it happens, but what's essential is that we recognize it when it happens. And we must not be led astray The great author Vladimir Soloviev wrote a play about the incarnation of the Antichrist, and he proposed that when the dark incarnation comes, that this person would come as a peacemaker, as if he has all the solutions to the world just by managing everything. It could be what happened. But it could happen another way with much more oppression and genocide. We don't know. But one thing that Rudolf Steiner did say is we must recognize it when it happens. And Rudolf Steiner was working diligently towards creating the so-called threefold social order, that we humans should create a society in which our human rights, our human freedom, and our economies are in right relationship. And he said, these things will be so important that they're in place when Michael is reigning and when Ahriman has his incarnation. And he even made a special aside and said, especially in the realm of economics, we must learn that money is not to be used for our own comfort and power. Money is used to support one another and be in community. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to speak now of how Michael is the archangel of our age. And before that was the age of Gabriel for 350 years, more or less. From the beginning of the consciousness soul from the 1500s, all the way up till 1879. You remember I said Michael is the one who turned Adam and Eve out of paradise. You remember this. Turning them out of paradise, he said, go and deal with the sense world. Immerse yourself in labor and suffering. Immerse yourself in that. And he can, Gabriel, he can deal with us in the sense of reflected knowledge, knowledge of the sense world. Gabriel is the archangel of the womb. And so in that sense, it has been absolutely correct that in his age, we developed the Industrial Revolution, mechanics, the machine, the birth of natural science, Francis Bacon, all of these scientific thinkers happened in his age. That's appropriate, but only up until a limit. And now we have to change. And that's why Michael comes into this world and he says, wait, this natural scientific thinking is no longer appropriate for us. That's why Michael is ready to rip what happened in the Gabrielic age as natural science, strip it bare of its illusions, not out of what is true about natural science. Natural science is good. It was important for us to develop clear thinking, but now we have to go beyond it. And so, yeah, as I was saying, we are the same people who lived once long ago with the spiritual beings. We're the same beings, and now we deny them, and we feel very proud that we can say there are no such things as spiritual beings. That was a fable. And because we say that, Ahriman has direct access to us. He says, oh, you don't believe in spirits? I've got something better for you. Michael is around us and he is inside us. He's inside us. So we think about this song that we sing at Michaelmas. When I conquer within me fear and wrath, then Michael in heaven casts the dragon forth. So we have a little bit more to go, and I want to read again from these Michael letters. Michael's preparation for his mission at the end of the 19th century, 1879, happens with a mood of cosmic tragedy. He looked down on the earth where Gabriel was working, And he felt deepest satisfaction about the way that people conceived nature. Well, no, people felt this satisfaction. They felt good about what they were doing in science. But Michael was developing a great sense of tragedy and the obstacles that people were having for getting a true picture of the human being. We thought humans were just evolutionary, genetic, Darwinistic mistakes or wonders, neurons, electricity inside us, and so on. In earlier periods, Michael's lofty spiritualized love lived in the raying out of sunlight, in the gleam of the morning skies and the sparkling of the stars. Now, this love, the last part of the 1800s, now this love had taken on as its dominant trait a sorrowing gaze when he looked at the human race. Michael's cosmic situation became one of tragic difficulty, but also one demanding solution. At that period, just before he became the archangel of the age, human beings could maintain their intellectuality only when they were in the body, and they're only in the senses. But when they did that, they had no attempt to understand the things that didn't come from the sense impressions. Nature became, for the modern human being, only what we could experience through the senses. And these were all conceived materially. Nature's creations were no longer conceived as the work of the divine spiritual, but as really something in existence lacking spirit, yet out of which it was asserted that it had brought forth the spiritual element in which man lives. And so let me see. All that still lived in the human soul was drawn from the current realms of experience that Michael did not enter, preceding 1879. People were delighted to feel the firm ground underneath their feet. They thought that they had achieved this because they did not seek in nature concepts tinged by subjective fantasy that they feared. But Michael was not happy, and he's still not right now. He had to carry on his battle against Lucifer and Ahriman in his own world, his world of spirit, remote from humanity. And this resulted in his great and tragic difficulty. For Lucifer's approach to man is made easier the more Michael, who is also a preserver of the past, is forced to keep at a distance from humanity. As I said last week, he's not allowed to appear in the physical realm because he is moral. Ahriman's allowed to appear in the physical realm. Michael is not allowed to because he's moral. And so Michael, decisive sentence here, for the sake of mankind, waged a fierce battle with Ahriman and Lucifer in the spiritual world, immediately bordering on the earth, even while human beings on earth occupied their souls in ways that were running counter to their whole wholesome evolution. And he talks about this, just a second, I'll come back to that. I want to read the last sentence in which he says, actually, all of this applies only to the spiritual life of Europe and America. It would be necessary to speak differently about Asia. I find that tantalizing. We need to look at that later, but that's a different question. And so we have the picture that from 1849 to 1879, Rudolf Steiner says, Michael waged a great battle in heaven against Ahriman. That means, perhaps you can have this picture, that this energy was striving to reach towards human souls after we died. So we would be lost in Ahriman's realm after we died, and that's still a possibility. We can still get stuck there. He still can grab spirits there, but not forever. And also his thoughts could crystallize in the spiritual realm. And we learned that in this battle, Michael was able to put Ahriman on the realm of the earth. The consequence of that is everything we're living with now. Ahriman is all around us. We live in his world, but Michael has come into our hearts in a new way. So now we're closing this lecture, and we have to think there must be a way through this with courage, if this story is real. Michael, we are reading, says, I'll show you the way. I won't argue with you, but you need to practice brotherhood. Nationalism doesn't work. Don't get seduced by the computers. Practice humanity, deep loving humanity. Learn to develop in yourself your own capacity for consciousness. Don't long for comfort in the spiritual realm either. Long to find the divine in the earth, which was made from ancient Saturn, Sun, Moon, this divine body that we live in, physical, etheric, and astral. Learn to feel the fire in your soul. Learn to feel all of this as divine gifts. And don't let the materialistic point of view delude you. Such powerful, powerful thoughts. And so with that, you understand what we did in eurythmy. First of all, the weight and the light, and then the gesture E. And I want to read here at the end something that I'll send to you in the PDF. Something that Michael, or that Rudolf Steiner wrote. First of all, this first quote is a compilation of things that Rudolf Steiner wrote in different places. Although many of us have read it, as I'll read it to you tonight, he didn't actually write it in this order, but these are all his words. He says this: we must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes towards human beings out of the future. We must acquire serenity in all feelings and sensations about the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to everything that may come. And we must think that only that whatever comes to us is given to us by a world direction full of wisdom. This is part of what we must learn in this age, namely, to live out of pure trust without any sense of security in existence. Trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. Truly, nothing else will do if our courage is not to fail us. Let us seek the awakening from within ourselves every morning and every evening. Dear friends, I would let it stop there, but there's another pair of meditations that I want to give you. As I said, I will send these to you. This is 2 prayers, one speak in the morning when you awaken, and one in the evening. On awakening, say, "O Michael, I place myself under your protection. I connect myself with your guidance wholeheartedly so that this day may become an image of your destiny ordering will." This is one of the meditations that can strengthen our connection to Michael. And in the evening, as the sun goes down, we think the paired meditation. I carry my sorrow into the setting sun. And I place all my worries into her radiating womb, purified in love and transformed in light. They will return as helping thoughts and as strength for self-sacrificing deeds. Thank you. This has been a long, powerful, challenging, and hopefully also heartening presentation. And I would very much like to take a few chats. Before I do, please let me I want you to know that I'm going to be starting my next series of Eurythmy webinars next week, in which we will go, my intention is to talk more about our physical, etheric, and astral bodies related to the four elements, which are the manifestations of spirit into matter. And I'll also start the evening lectures next week, in which we'll go into that more conceptually, our physical, our etheric, our astral, and our ego. All right, let me see if there are any questions or comments. And I'm looking at the scroll. Michelle?
Yes.
I'm looking at this.
We have a question. Is the purpose of human beings to evolve as the 10th hierarchy of love and wisdom through redeeming the Ahrimanic and Luciferic entities within us and outside us by becoming one with the I Am presence, Christ essence within us? And then following that is it possible to resume our purpose here as redeemers of the cosmic rebels?
Yes, Matteo, the answer to what you say is wholeheartedly yes, yes, and yes. That is our purpose, to evolve as the 10th hierarchy of love and wisdom through the redeeming of the Ahrimanic and Luciferic entities within us and without us. Yes, by becoming one with the I Am saying, because you are, I am to the Christ. And in that, the cosmic rebels, Lucifer and Ahriman, and also the third rebel, whom I don't mention, we redeem them. Yes, yes, and yes. I have one more thing. I had a direct question from Tish Johnson, who said, I thought archangels developed their eye during the old sun stage. That's correct. If I misspoke and said it was the Saturn stage, forgive me, but definitely yes, during the sun stage. Okay, resume, meaning, summarize. Are we done here? Yes.
There we go. And lots of gratitude coming in for you.
Dear friends, thank you for joining, for being part of that. And I very much hope that you have the strength, every strength that you need on your own journeys. And be with us going forward if you like. Thank you so much. And Michelle, thank you as well.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cynthia.
Good night, everybody, or good morning to those of you in Asia. Okay, bye for now.